back to Your Marketing Buzz on BluHorn TV. Welcome to the bar where you can pull up a seat with your friends, grab a drink, toast to good people, and talk about marketing and advertising. So guys, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So we have Gary Spurgeon, David Sillick, and Austin Van Horn join us today. So I want you to introduce yourselves and what is your specialty in media?
Well, my name is Gary Spurgeon. I have been in broadcast, actually, I may not look it, but 40 years. I've done everything in broadcast, radio broadcast side of the business.
It's done its toll on you.
Yes, yeah. You know, I tell people I'm 200 in radio years. But no, I've done everything in the broadcast industry, from actually starting promotions on the streets, straight up through account executive, and at a very young age got market manager, general manager. And since then, I've been running stations in small, medium, large, and major market radio. And most recently, senior vice president of a major broadcasting group where I was traveling the country and helping each one of the markets. So I've got quite the background in radio media, dealing with all other types of media between ad agencies and radio and television stations. But I've had the great opportunity to work with many great people in different parts of the media.
Excellent. Now let's go to the dinosaur in the room.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Not your age, but so David has experience in print.
I actually started in the agency business, grew up in the agency business. My father had his own ad agency in a number of different markets. Started my career in Columbus, Ohio, and then moved to North Carolina, and this new concept was starting to pop up around the country called business journals. And I was doing media planning, media buying, account work for an agency in Raleigh-Durham, and just fell in love with the concept because I had a lot of B2B clients, and became their largest agency client. So I had so many, like I said, B2B clients, and pretty soon at a very young age realized that I wasn't going to make the kind of money I needed to make in the agency business, and got recruited over to the business journals, and my career took off. I started in sales, and then became regional and national sales manager. Then advertising director in medium market, large market, major market, and then had the opportunity to become president and publisher in this market 22 years ago, and ran this business journal for 20 years.
Excellent. And Austin, TV expert and a whole lot of other stuff. So how'd you get started?
My first job was in local radio in Richmond, Kentucky, for an AM station that broadcast. My first year, disco came on the scene. So that's going back a few years. After that, I transitioned into television, local television and regional television and national television sales. Then I jumped out of it and went to work in information technology for a number of years, working on digital marketing and advertising, and then jumped back into the business on the agency side. For the last 12 years, worked for an agency that we helped grow into a national powerhouse with clients like Credit Karma, 23andMe, SodaStream. So I've worked in radio, television on the sales side, also worked on the agency side, and I've been on the client side as well.
Gary, what's the difference in terms of, as you've gone from small, medium, large supermarkets, what's the difference in terms of managing the teams in those different size markets?
Really, that's a great question, because everybody asks me that. Ironically, really nothing. It really isn't. I mean, people are people, whether you're in a small market like Erie, Pennsylvania, where I got my start, or in Dallas and Houston, or Texas, it doesn't make a difference. You're dealing with, I call, bigger nickels. Buys are bigger. You're dealing with a lot of major ad agencies, that type, and your composition of your business is differently. Like in Erie, Pennsylvania, you're going to be having 85 to 90% of your business is local direct. Where when you get to like a Dallas, Texas, where 85 to 95% of our business is through agency and transactional, that type of thing. So from an operational standpoint, you have a lot more people, maybe a lot more moving parts, but the bottom line is people are people. They have the same wants, the same needs, but when you're dealing with the business aspect of it, you're dealing with a different level. And somebody asks me all the time, what's better? Is it the agency business, or is it the having that much of the transactional, or the local direct? I believe with more local direct, that's what more broadcasters are trying to move to today. you have more control of the business because of you don't fall with the ebbs and flows of what goes on in the economy as much.
So how will ratings affect that local direct or the smaller markets as opposed to larger?
Not as much, because in most of the smaller rated markets, let's say below 50, maybe below 75, you don't get as many books because you're dealing with Nielsen. So instead of dealing with 4 books a year, or even the weeklies, you're only dealing with maybe 2 books a year. So the ratings aren't as much. You can influence most buyers, but you're only dealing with smaller markets. When you're dealing with smaller markets, you only have 10 stations, where you're dealing with 40, 50 stations in the large markets. So
I was curious about the movement back to local in smaller markets, because of so much of the radio programming syndicated now as a cost measure. How has that impacted listenership in local markets?
Well, it's interesting. The latest studies that's been out, and I could be off a point here, but 94% of people still listen to a radio broadcast some way, shape, or form at every age. That's 12 plus during the week. So it's not really affecting as much most people think. But once again, I think one of the biggest challenges for me in the broadcast industry has been we can't get away from what makes us special. What's makes us unique is the localness. And getting rid of local announcers, to me, has been a big challenge. I fought that, and every time I've ran it, even in the major markets, we didn't have the syndicated. Most of our stuff was still local announcers. But as I see, the trend's been changing. The iHearts of the world kind of started this whole role, and everybody's picked up on it because it's a cost saving. But once again, when that tornado comes through, or that hurricane comes through, or that major event happens in your market, are you on top of that? And that's my biggest concern today. But I know we're going to start talking a little bit more about this probably, but there's been a change with all these digital. It's what is now is how we're delivering, and how is our audience receiving our message. That's how we're receiving the message today. How are we getting that message out? And so with the proliferation of we were ironically talking about this before we went on the air, the phones, it's becoming a very strategic way of delivering our information. As I tell people today, in broadcast, no matter what we're doing, it's the audience delivery business. How are we delivering that audience, and how is our advertisers or our listeners consuming our product? So that's what we're all trying to determine now. And there is a metamorphosis going on in the broadcast.
That's what happened with the newspaper industry. We transitioned in terms of revenue, dollars to dimes, quarters in some instances if you're lucky. But it was a transition of how you deliver that news to the digital platform, and I don't think anybody really relies on getting that paper Monday or in the morning, or even on a weekly basis to get that news. They're getting it on their phone, on their tablet.
And that's where programming is changing from local sports and the time spent on it. By the time the sports broadcast comes around, or newscast,
and the impact it's really had on buying. There's still a lot of direct. But it used to be to buy a B2B audience as influential and wealthy as a business journal audience. There was only one place to get it. If you wanted that audience, we really had it captured. Now you can buy that audience through programmatic means, and you can deliver that profile, and you'll get it in a number of different ways. Some impressions will be delivered through a business journal's environment, but other impressions will be delivered through other means, and it's been a real transition, a real evolution in the business.
What about podcasts in the radio market, with the popping up of new podcasts every day? Is that pulling away from that local direct radio listener, because a lot of those on-air talents that used to be local direct now have their own podcasts that they're promoting digitally? How will that affect the dollars that stream into radio, do you think?
That's a great question. I think because there are agencies out there, and actually buys being placed strictly on podcasts. I think radio groups now are trying to get into the podcast business. It's not becoming a big financial reward for them at this point. They're just delving into it, as is this digital world that we're getting into, because that's the big change in how we're not only delivering our product, but what we're offering, the offers that we're offering to the clients these days too, is how. But once again, podcast is there, but it's not as impactful as it's just an extension of their product, an extension of their brands, is the best way I can put it.
On the agency side, we had a lot of interest in podcasting from national advertisers. And you really have to understand the profile of the client and how they want to target a specific audience and what their budget is. And those were the two key factors in deciding whether to include podcasting as a percent of the media buy or not. Now, there are some podcasts that draw weekly 10 million, 9 million, 8 million, 5 million viewers, say a Joe Rogan or a How Was This Made? Many of them are produced by NPR, and that's a source of revenue for the radio podcasters. But in general sense, you'll find that the advertisers on, say, a Ben Shapiro or a Joe Rogan or some of the other types of mass market podcasts that are pulling sizable audiences are still limited to large advertisers with more money than they know how to spend, and niche advertisers. And the other interesting thing you'll find about podcasting is that many times the hosts have a vested interest or a share of the revenue that's generated from the results driven from their podcasts. For example, Ben Shapiro pushes shirts, or he pushes stamps.com, and it's stamps.com/Ben, and they then get compensated for the number of people that have signed up. We were working with Credit Karma, and they were an early adopter of podcasting. And it was very, very hard to measure. And that was a problem with podcasting as well, because it would come in sporadically. If you're driving in your car or you're walking the dog and you're listening to a podcast, you're more than likely not to interact with that offer at that point in time. And so it's difficult to point back to when you first got contacted unless you're typing in that /Ben type of moniker.
All right, I'm going to put you guys on the spot here. I want to try this out, see if it works. So, media buyer side, take yourself 5 years back in terms of buying media for Credit Karma. You're in the Jacksonville market, Jacksonville, Florida, and you've got Gary coming in trying to pitch radio 5 years ago. And you've got David coming in trying to push print and the digital products with Business Journal. What is your pitch? You have 1 minute to pitch Austin on why buy radio against print, and you have 1 minute to pitch Austin why buy print against radio.
Wow. That's kind of putting us on the spot. I think one of the challenges is that, during the Q&A process is that, okay, how much is their budget? What are they trying to accomplish with this? Like anything else, what are you trying to accomplish? And I'm going to shift gears just for a second, because everybody's looking more direct response, but how do they present again it? How do we fit in that media mix? And does it make sense? Is this target demographic what you're going for fit within what you're trying to accomplish? It's funny, I've hardly ran into the situation where I'm trying to pitch against other medias. In our industry, we seem to like we go at, we're trying to cut after, hey, how much money are you investing in the broadcast side of things, and then what are you doing in the digital, and can we go and give you a 360 campaign? But that was five years ago. Things have changed in 5 years. I can't even think about 5 years ago. It's like, what? So
all right, your minute's up. Did he win the business?
I don't know. I didn't win the business, did I? I just asked. I've asked a lot of questions.
Properly contracting to figure out.
I would tell you this: we placed media on radio mainly to get to the digital properties, because the local stations still pull a good many people. It's difficult to attribute it back to that specific campaign, but if you had saturated, and we did this a 6-market test. Dallas was one of the markets, Portland, LA, because they wanted to try local media versus national media where your CPMs are lower, to see if you could strike a balance between a higher conversion and response rate and hopefully reach people that you couldn't reach with national media in the traditional sense. And there was some success in some markets, and they continue to this day, mainly through the radio digital platforms, because local radio digital still pulls in a part of the market that's difficult to reach in other places. And when you've already grown to 50 million users, you really have to scrap and fight to get that last 10 or 20 million that you want to have as a registered user.
Well, I won't make David pitch, but am I curious?
Well, no, I would.
Business journal use, business journals were looked at as a way to try and court companies to take advantage of the data opportunity.
And
it was a B2B.
That's why I had to come at it at a B2B play. But first of all, I wouldn't have gone in and pitched in newspapers.
Now, 5 years ago, what percent
5 years
of
ago,
the revenue was towards the print product, and what was towards your digital products at that point?
It was still 15%, 20% was digital.
And now what do you think that is in terms of a print publication that exists
That's
now?
probably 25%, another 25% on event marketing. I mean, you saw not only business journals, but you saw lots of trade publications in the B2B environment, and there's thousands of them, go into event marketing. Whether they're doing their own local specialized trade shows, they had to diversify.
The revenue in that area is.
I mean, you had to diversify your income stream. You weren't making it on subscriptions. It cost you, more to acquire a subscriber than it did to than the price of the subscription in the first 2 to 3 years. Once they renewed, and we had very high renewal rates, 65-70%, which is unheard of in the print industry. But they became profitable in years 3, 4, 5, and beyond because of the renewals. But still, it cost a lot to acquire that subscriber. The value of paid circulation to media buyers was still a premium, so we were able to charge a premium price for our advertising. You take that to the digital environment, and it's a completely different landscape because they're buying on a cost per thousand. And I'd been talking more about the quality of the conversion, the quality of the audience. We might be getting fewer click-throughs, but what's really are we analyzing the conversion rates compared to the other media that you're using.
All right, well, that's the time we have today on the Marketing Buzz. We're going to talk about next time, coming up, is why media companies need to act like ad agencies and how they're converting to offering multiple channels to their audiences. So thank you for watching us on Your Marketing Buzz on BluHorn TV. We look forward to seeing you next time. Go to BluHorn.com to see all episodes and future shows. Have a wonderful day. Cheers to you all.
Cheers. Thanks.